Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome 80-20 baseball community. Time to level up our baseball knowledge. Speaking of baseball knowledge, there's a lot to learn by watching baseball, and I love watching the College World Series. In fact, as I record this episode, the deciding Game 3 will be starting in 1 hour. And of course, as you're hearing this, the champion will have already been crowned. College baseball is a ton of fun to watch, and there's a lot that we can take away from the college game. It replicates youth baseball a lot more than professional baseball when it comes to in-game strategy. Not so much the 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old level, but definitely that 13 and 14-year-old level. The plays we see and all the learning aside, it's just fun to watch. I'm going to do my best to get my family out to Omaha next year. Now, another sport that became instantaneously more fun to watch for me, soccer. They're giving yellow cards to floppers now. Seeing that instantaneously elevated my interest in soccer. Now, if they just get rid of the offsides rule once the ball is past midfield, I think I'd easily go from watching 2 soccer games a year to 5. No, actually, I recommend youth athletes play some soccer. It'll help your footwork for baseball, for any sport you want to play. Now back to baseball. The next time we're working with our hitters and we're giving them a checklist of 7 or 8 things to think about when it comes to their approach, when it comes to their hitting plan. In this count, we're looking for this. First pitch, we're looking for that. With 2 strikes, we're looking for this pitch. We're going to do this with our bat, with this with our hands. We're going to widen out. We're going to lower down. We're going to get on the plate. We're going to back off the plate. We're looking to hit it here. We're looking to hit it there. Okay, great. Now that we got all that figured out, now go do the hard part. Get the timing right and actually square up the ball and hit it between the foul lines. The hitting approach, the hitting plan may very well be the most overcoached thing in all of baseball at every level. The average little leaguer has 3/10 of a second, about 3/10 of a second, about 3/10 of a second to decide whether to swing or not. So we're going to keep giving them a checklist of things, a spreadsheet of data, scouting report, and they're going to process that in 3/10 of a second. Oh, and then do the hard part, be on time and square up the ball physically, stay balanced, get the kinetic sequencing perfect. Good luck. Even at the high school level, like the varsity level and above, you're talking 2/10 of a second. I was reading an article about Major League Baseball players challenging balls and strike calls and when they should challenge it. Fangraphs had a great article on this. They were interviewing some managers, some bench coaches, players, and they were talking about when to challenge, when to use the ABS system, the new challenging system, when to use it, when not to use it, what counts are important, what counts are more valuable. Speaking of which, there's the 80-20 principle. It's everywhere, and it comes up pretty closely here. Only about 20% of high-value counts and high-value situations net 70% of all run value that's possible from ABS challenges. Now that's the 20-70 rule. So I've seen teams that are saying, hey, we're not going to challenge in these counts, like early counts, like any 2-1 count, when the bases are empty with 0 outs or only 1 out, or with 2 outs and no one in scoring position. Those would be times to save it for the vital few counts and situations that actually drive and move the needle when challenging the call. So like if the team wins the call, it really can add a much greater potential run value. The leverage increase is dramatically higher. Now, I'm going to tie in something that's partially related to that, but I thought that was an interesting side note. Blake Butera, the Nationals manager, said this about having his players challenge the calls. He said, as a coaching staff, our preference is when there's a runner on base, when it's late in the game, to be more aggressive versus when nobody's on or earlier in the game. But it's kind of a lot for the players to consider when it's such a quick decision. He's saying it's a quick decision. They get 2 seconds to challenge the call. They get 2 seconds to decide. And he's saying that's a lot to think about in 2 seconds. He said at the end of the day, they don't need to figure it out as they go. It's hard to say, hey, you're only allowed to do it in this inning with runners on these bases, in these counts, with this guy on the mound. That's just a lot. I've seen players say the same thing. It's a lot. Trying to figure out when to challenge, when not to challenge. They get 2 seconds. You go, well, Coach Bo, 2 seconds, that's not a lot. Yeah, you know what is 10 times less than that? The amount of time they get to decide whether to swing or not. Yet, I see major league coaches, I see college coaches, I see high school coaches all the time sharing a laundry list of things that players need to focus on when they're hitting, when it comes to what count, what pitch, and where to hit it. And that's why the 80-20 baseball hitting plan, the hitting approach, we've been talking about it forever here. There's a good article that lays it out. When it comes to what pitches to swing at and what pitches not to swing at, it is the most minimal plan. It is the hitting approach synthesized, boiled down to its most granular level, because you know what? When you got 0.3 of a second to decide whether to swing or not, hitters will be lucky to be more successful than not with the most basic true-false type of plan. That's all they have time to think about as hitters up there. And the rest of it needs, like the timing, handling of different pitches in different locations, that needs to be worked out through a lot of quality batting practice reps, hitting reps, T reps. So we got a major league manager saying that professional players, the best players in the world, with 2 seconds to decide whether to challenge a call after seeing the pitch, he's saying that's a lot. It's such a quick decision. Yet I can't tell you how many major league coaches and youth coaches and everything in between send their players up there with a checklist of requirements on what pitches to swing at and what pitches to look for and what to do in certain counts. So I thought it was interesting that he thinks 2 seconds to decide whether to tap their helmet or not is not a lot of time, but I'm sure he's got hitters going up there with a checklist of 10 things in their hitting approach, hitting plan. So keep that in mind, simplify the hitting approach, be on time, and swing at pitches in the hitting zone with less than 2 strikes and in or near the strike zone with 2 strikes. 0.3 of a second, youth coaches, for our hitters to get the answer right, to swing or not to swing. Got to rep this in practice. They need feedback often on this. After 3+ decades of hearing every approach and plan under the sun, while at the same time everybody's saying hitting's the hardest thing to do in sports, and you only have 0.2 of a second, 0.3 of a second to get the right answer, you have to go up there with the most simple, streamlined plan possible, and that's what you'll find at 8020baseball.com. It's one of the articles over there. By the way, I've been updating the website, and I'm excited to be adding quite a few videos to the video library. Short videos, 60 seconds to 2-minute videos where players can watch and level up their IQ efficiently. These videos are edited, fast-paced. It's the fastest way to level up baseball IQ for players. I'm going to be adding those to the library. They'll be category specific, and you can also get those when they go live on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. One last thing before we get into a fantastic interview today. The next time we go out to the field, and we're out there at that 10-year-old baseball game, remember that at the highest level of baseball in the world, much less the 10-year-old baseball tournament that we're going to this weekend, the highest level of baseball with the average umpire, from what I've been able to find, makes $250,000 a year, total comp. They have missed 2,545 strike ball calls, 2,545 strike ball calls have been overturned already, and it's just June. Major League umpires are projected to have 5,355 of their strike ball calls overturned, in other words, deemed incorrect, this season alone. So when we roll out to our 12-year-old baseball game with high expectations for the umpire, those high expectations are not rooted in any facts. If we set our expectations for umpires rationally, reasonably, and based on evidence, we would go out there and tell ourselves and our players, hey guys, the Major League umpires are going to miss 5,355 strike ball calls this year. And they are paid 1,000 times more than the umpires that are umpiring our game. Expect some bad calls. They're going to miss calls. Our best response, stay calm, don't dwell on it, don't argue, maybe have a calm conversation if it's a rule that might have been interpreted incorrectly by the ump. Other than that, move on, focus on effort, fundamentals, the next play. And coaches, we're the ones that should be modeling this and emphasizing it with our players. It's going to get them ready for life. Not gonna be a bunch of whiners. It's one thing to stand up when you feel like there was something that could be double checked, possibly reversed due to a misinterpretation of a rule. But like the great mental game book is titled, So What Next Pitch? Speaking of So What Next Pitch, our guest today, Coach Ryan Vondracek. He's the head of pitching operations for the Minnesota Renegade Baseball Club. It's a youth program. He does that in the summer. He's also the head of recruiting at Crown College and a guy who's been through something extremely challenging. Yet he said, so what, next pitch. Got a bad break? I'm moving forward. He's going to talk about that. Ryan was that undersized kid, you know, the one that throws like low 70s, mid 70s as a high school senior, barely got any looks and had to fight through a very tough health condition that he'll talk about here. But he kept working, kept learning the game, and ended up becoming a solid college pitcher who still holds the single season ERA record. In this episode, Ryan is going to share his full story and the lessons he's learned the hard way. He talks about what really matters when developing pitchers, especially kids who aren't the biggest, fastest, or throw the hardest. He also gives straight talk on building strong team cultures, developing mental toughness, working with parents, and why relationships are the most important part of coaching. Whether you're a youth coach, a parent, a player who feels like the odds might be stacked against you, this episode is awesome. So I feel confident you're going to walk away encouraged and with some clear ideas you can actually use. With that said, let's get into the interview with Coach Ryan Vondracek. All right, listeners, I am pumped up to be here today with Ryan Vondracek. Coach Vondracek, how you doing, Ryan?
Pretty good. How are you, Coach Bo?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm pumped up. I saw this list of questions that we've put together over the last few weeks to have you dive into for the listeners. With that said, I appreciate you being here, and I'd love for you to give the listeners a synopsis of your backstory and what's led you to where you're at now, and tell us what you're doing right now in the world of baseball.
Absolutely. I think my story is actually a little bit different than most, but at the same time, I think it's one of those stories. If you look down a high school roster, at least you can find at least two of me in every roster, right? You have that undersized kid that really enjoys the game of baseball, works really hard, but doesn't always get those type of looks. My baseball journey, at least from a really young age, I was always undersized, incredibly undersized. The good Lord had a lot of great plans for me, however, and what I mean by that was even though I was undersized from a really young age, I grew up at the field in a stroller. So we have a minor league stadium about 5 minutes down the road from me called the Cedar Rapids Colonels. Started when I was really young as the Angels organization, and then now it's the Twins organization. I would sit at the top in my stroller, and we built that relationship even when I was really young. I would get passed around from all the different types of families. So even at the age of 1 to 2, I could be on any part of the stadium. And my parents always had eyes on me because we always knew the owners and things like that. So it was a really cool trying to understand the game from a really young age there. Because maybe I didn't have all those wonderful intangibles. However, at the same time, it was one of those things where I felt like with watching it, even maybe not always understanding it at an early age, those things came easy for me. I think it was one of those things where I enjoyed swinging the bat. Obviously, everyone enjoys that side of things. But some of the really small detail-oriented things in the game I really enjoyed. Obviously, being left-handed, there's not many options. I know that there shouldn't be. I played third growing up just because from a baseball IQ perspective, I wasn't fast enough for short. They put me at second a little bit, but third just felt comfortable for me. I don't know if it was always the right decision, but it was one of those things. So I pitch and play third. When I kind of got a little bit older, from an arm perspective, they put me in right, and there's nothing more fun than seeing that guy round third base. You come up firing and you get him at that young age. So it's kind of those little things I looked for. Even at a young age, from a mentality perspective, at least on the mound, I might not have overpowered you, but I knew how to pitch. And I learned that at a really young age. I think the big thing for a lot of youth individuals, at least until I think it was 13 for myself, I didn't throw anything but fastball changeup. I learned how to work in, I learned how to work out, and I learned how to work where I'd actually start the changeup, kind of add a righty and bring it back. I know that's probably something that's not taught very often anymore, but that was something I was comfortable with. And then once I grew into myself and understood that, okay, yeah, you somehow throw a UFO changeup, it's one of those things where me being left-handed, I had a lot of success because a lot of the guys that we face are right-handed. With a 2-pitch mix, I knew how to get batters out. So then when I was a little bit older, I think I was 14, 15 when I added the curveball. So then I had a 3-pitch mix. And then high school, I had a 4-pitch mix. I went slider with that. Even though I wouldn't overpower you, all the way up to, I think, a senior in high school, I was only 74, 75. I was about 5'9", a buck 35. If we're talking about things those college coaches look for, I'm not a guy that you look at and yeah, I need that guy, man. So that was one of those tough things, right? But I think from a mentality perspective, if you gave me that opportunity, I showed you why. And I think that was not only because of being able to watch baseball at a young age, but never really having at least the really close voices in my corner say that I could not do it. It doesn't really matter if everyone else is saying you don't, but if you're really tight-knit individuals, so family, coaches that you've believed in your whole entire life, there's always going to be people who are going to say that they don't understand or they don't believe that you can. But if you find yourself in those situations, you're like, hey, I can get through this because I know from a preparation standpoint, I've stacked my days. But at the same time, it's at the end of the day, I know that at least for me, what I meant by a different journey in the beginning. So I was born with a hole in my heart. And so at 5 months, I had a hole in my heart and two things happened. It either closes up naturally, which is obviously a blessing from God itself, or you no longer make it. So when that happened, my heart closed up on its own. And when that happens, there's a lot of physical things that kind of, with all the different types of parts of the body that kind of are connected, right? And so when my family put me on the ground, I didn't crawl. I just stood straight up. And you don't learn your fine motor skills that way. So I was in therapy for 8 years before that. So not only undersized, but had to go through therapy because I had to understand all these different types of movement patterns. So pencils, I broke a lot of pencils because I didn't understand pressures, timing with sounds, things like that. In those types of situations, you can try really hard, but things might not come to you, right? To this day, like, some physical activities other than pitching have always been difficult. Riding a bike's always been tough. Swimming's always been tough because it's polar opposites. You're using one half of your body and then you're using the other half of your body. But now if you just look back and understand that side of things, and with what I've been able to go through and things like that, and truly that every day is a blessing. It's like one of those things where once I kind of got into college ball and things like that, once I got those opportunities, which I was blessed with one offer to go to Hibbing Community College out of high school. So my first year there, I was probably still a little bit undersized. So they put me on a kind of meal plan. And once they put me on that meal plan, things started to click a little bit. I went from 74 to I think 77, 78 my freshman year, and then things just clicked from there. By the end of sophomore year, we joke about it till this day, actually, via the JUCO coach. When we put my numbers out there, we sent a video that I was 80-81 from the left side. If anyone understands that, it's okay, that's probably like a high level high school guy, or the start of, at least. And so it's like you see guys like that and then you see 90. So it's okay, so where do I fit in? But we joke about that because my next two starts after that, we had a start at US Bank. I was 84-85. So things just clicked. And it was one of those things where it's like, you put in all this work, you put in all this effort, you don't know when it's going to come. And so things just clicked. From there, I had an opportunity to go play at Crown College. They actually just won the UMAC championship the year before I went there. Was blessed to play with a lot of really talented individuals that next year. Was actually in attendance for that tournament, which was pretty cool, coming back down, being from Iowa. So was able to catch that, and then was at Crown for 3 years. If I'm able to look back at my journey, it's one of those things where obviously if I was as a senior in high school and you're looking at it like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of kids and a lot of parents listening where it's like, my son's incredibly in love with the sport. He's going to work incredibly hard, but his numbers don't jump off the page. There's no one that understands that story more than me, and there's no one that understands that story more than our coaching staff. By the end of my playing career, I was able to do some pretty cool things myself, and I think that's a testament not only from a work ethic perspective and just being able to be given that chance, right? And I think a lot of kids just need to be given that chance. And I think if we give them that chance and they maybe don't succeed that first time, we got to give grace with that. But at the end of the day, it's like, how much are you guys putting in on the outside to be able to get those opportunities? And I think that's something that we have to always think about too. What I mean by that was, being a very undersized guy, I've been able to play in the Northwoods 2 years. I'm incredibly blessed with the opportunity. I now hold the single season ERA record at Crown as well. So going from a guy that wasn't really given that respect to a guy that is pretty blessed now in what he's been able to do, it's really incredibly humbling at the same time. But it's like, I understand that those gifts were given to me by God, and I just need to continue to accept those. So after my college career was actually finished, I had opportunities to go play overseas and professionally. And it was one of those things where it was a really tough decision for me. But then I kind of looked at it where it's like, you've already done so much, right? And you have this type of mind and you see pitching in a different way. Why not give back? And so when my career was done, I was able to do that in two different levels and affect not only youth coming up from an arm care perspective, but understanding the game of baseball from maybe a lens of a kid who wasn't really given those opportunities. Now to be able to give those kids those opportunities and see them flourish when something clicks. It's, oh man, that's so cool. That's all you ever wanted from kind of coaches in your corner. And obviously you have them, but at the same time, there's some that aren't because they just don't understand you. So I think that's the big thing, is like, we just have to understand the athlete from their perspective. And once that happens and we don't make everyone robots, that's when we're going to find success. And I think being able to go through that myself, I understand that. That's one of those things that makes maybe not only coaching unique, but myself unique, is just because everyone has a story. How are we going to be able to show that story in kind of our training and teachings? But at the same time, how are we going to be able to, when we see someone fall into those patterns that we kind of fell into, it's like, okay, we already know how this goes. I personally understand how this goes. Right? So it's just one of those things where it's like, you can help athletes so much now because of those things.
When I hear that, I think of how uniquely qualified you are to be in the role that you're in now as a coach. Talking to you the last month or so and looking into kind of what you're doing, to me, it piqued my interest because you really have a passion for the game. And you also had to work through a lot of challenges and struggles. Like you said, as someone who came from being an undersized high school pitcher who was barely touched 80, was in the 70s, what key mindset or training shifts helped you develop into a college pitcher? And what do you see youth coaches missing most often in developing similar non-obvious talents?
I think the big thing now is everyone wants those really cool bells and whistles and say, oh, I can spin it this way and I can do this and I can do that. And they're not watching that kind of video in slow mo and understanding actually how the baseball moves. And I think the numbers are beautiful to see that if you can't see that with kind of your human eye and things like that. But I think a lot of guys get bogged down in those types of ideas of, I'm not spinning it this way and it's not moving this way. But it's with my human eyes. If I'm getting outs, then I'm getting outs. And so the big thing for me was, at least at a young age, I knew that my baseball moved quite a bit. And I think if I wasn't left-handed, I don't know if maybe some of these opportunities that I wouldn't have gotten. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things where it's like you can tell work ethic over you can tell velo. Even now, I'm now just started from a recruiting end. I'm looking for the kid who, once he gets on the mound, he's throwing everything with intent and letting it move naturally instead of just babying it. And you can just kind of see it from those different types of things. If you have two pitches that you can do that with and you can mix in and out, up and down, the ideas of in, out, up and down are very simple. But if you can do that at a very high level, you're going to get outs and you're going to get opportunities with that. And that's not breaking off the most disgusting curveball. That's not with being able to snap your wrist in a slider because you need it in that count. Fastball, changeup, and be able to locate those and understand the hardest part of pitching is, yes, you might have 4 pitches and you might have thrown 4 pitches since you've been like 11 years old, but at the same time, can you locate those 4 pitches or do you just have those 4 pitches? And it actually brings back a pretty funny story. When I was growing up, so for the All-Star game for Iowa, it's kind of broken into our different sections. One of the teams that I actually had 2 guys that are now in the minor leagues. One of them was actually catching. We were real young. I think we were 11. And a kid comes on the mound. I don't believe he did anything even at the college level, but he was funny. But when we were 11, he had 7 pitches. That's what he said. And he goes, this does this and this does this. And he had a split finger at 11. And so the funny thing about that was Calvin Harris, who I grew up playing against a lot, was the outfielder for Old Miss, would have been the starting catcher for Old Miss, but there was a guy by the name of Hayden Dunhurst, and he's just not playing over Hato. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, even at a young age, you can tell who's really going to, from a mentality perspective, how they're going to get out. And he was a heck of a pitcher himself, and he was just a little bit better with the bat. And I think when you're able to kind of look at it from that perspective and have those conversations with hitters as well, even if you're a pitcher, it's like, hey, what are you seeing? So even in live ABs, it's all the way up to the college level. I always did that. And same thing from a pitching perspective. You stand behind your guys and you just see what they're doing. How are they carrying themselves? If there's a strike up in the zone that you thought was there, but they react, understand that you're not going to get that pitch the next pitch just because of how your body language interpreted those type of opportunities. Those are the hard little lessons that you have to learn through the game. And, I didn't back up here. This guy's going to take a base on me. So there's a lot of intricate ideas within the game. But if we simplify it in the easiest form of in, out, up, down, we're going to get a lot of success. And I think we just kind of overcomplicate that, where it's got to be here. When it kind of gets into that high school, college level, at least myself, I was incredibly intricate. I thought there was 21 squares on the plate, and I was able to do that at a very high level. For a youth kid, you can't tell him that there's 21 areas on the plate for him to kind of throw those things. So the big thing for rule of thumb for myself, at least with what I look for, is I want you to throw everything middle, and I want it to work naturally. If it's going to work naturally, it's going to, especially from your arm slot, most arm slots, it's going to have ride. Understand how to throw that as hard as I possibly can through the middle and let it react. And when we do that, everything's going to be sharper, because we're not trying to throw it to the catcher, we're trying to throw it through the catcher with everything. And that's how we're going to get at that movement, and that's how we're going to get that swing and miss or that soft contact. And the more we do that and the more we're in the zone, the longer we're going to be in ball games. No one likes that pitcher out there who's not throwing strikes, and you're in the field and you're like, okay, I can't get my rhythm, I can't get my timing. You're out there in center field and you're looking around, they're fighting dandelions, and you're just getting distracted. So it's how am I going to be able to get the 7 guys behind me, but also probably the most influential guy on the field. And I've always always thought this, the guy in front of me. How are we going to be able to have that relationship, and is that relationship good? And I think that's another thing that people don't think about. So I think that's one of those things that kind of simplifies it. At least that's how I looked at the game, and I think that's how we continue to look at it, just a little bit more from an advanced lens.
Interesting stuff right there. I really like how you talked about playing off the pitcher's strength and playing off their natural abilities and not forcing them to do different things and allowing them to be their natural self and working off that. That's pretty sweet. Now, you're the head of recruiting at Crown College. What do college coaches actually look for? And maybe something you look for, some things you look for that maybe aren't as common, but you really believe in when it comes to high school players and younger players beyond the radar gun, beyond stats, especially for pitchers and position players who might not be the biggest and flashiest.
I think there's a lot of things in this game that you cannot teach. And what I mean by that is when a guy gets on the mound, is he looking down at his catcher and is he like, okay, I'm going to knock him over? Is he getting up in counts? Does he understand how to get swing and miss? If he does throw a ball early in the count, is it to set things up? Does he understand how to use his misses? Does he fall into patterns? Does he understand fastball in is the best pitch in baseball if I throw it with conviction? And maybe that's a word that might be a little bit advanced for a lot of youth kids. But when we're throwing the ball, are we throwing it just to throw it? Or is there some type of intent behind it to get outs? Or are we just going through the motions? If there's a ball on the first base side, is he coming to cover? Or is he trusting his first baseman to get there? When he does walk a guy or get a guy to first base, even at the youth level, I can see exactly how a mind works or how a coach is able to coach. If a guy gets on first base and that pitcher, the first second that he does, he picks up his shortstop or second baseman to understand if he's going to turn to and who's he going to turn it with. Is the catcher calling the picks or is the pitcher doing the picks because he understands the game? When he's backing up a base, when he's backing up third, is he all the way to the fence to give length? Or is he right on his third baseman's hip? If there's a ball in the gap and he needs to kind of be in that no man's land between third and home and be able to choose, is he going to do that or does he go right to a base? When he's having conversations with his catcher, is he talking about Gatorade flavors or is he talking about, hey, maybe this is how we looked at this AB earlier and maybe we do the complete opposite? I think one of those things is a lot of people fall into those patterns. It can be really simplified, but even with a 2-pitch mix, if I keep you off balance, I can keep you off balance with a 2-pitch mix. Everyone thinks you need a 5-pitch mix. 5-pitch mix is awesome if you have 5 that you can locate. If there's pitches that you're not able to locate, unfortunately, those aren't part of your arsenal. Those are things that you can do, but those aren't things that you're proficient in. So let's work on the things that we're proficient in. Are we varying our holds? Are we writing things in our journal in between innings? Are we talking to ourselves? I know I was a psychopath. And what I mean by that was I actually had a gray jacket in college and it didn't matter how hot it was. If we went to Arizona, I had that thing on and it was probably 94. I was walking up and down the line because it was routine. When we got back to Minnesota, obviously it was Minnesota, so I had my parka on. People would call me crazy. It would be 80, 90 degrees. I'd still have that parka on. There's different things within the game that every athlete does that we have to allow them to do. But at the same time, we need them to understand, is it something that they need to do and can they explain why? I never need to understand the what that's going on. I need to understand if you know the why. If you know the why, I will never change anything. No coach will ever change anything. But if you're not able to explain why you're doing something, and there might be something that is a hindrance or something that maybe is not working for you as much as you thought, then maybe that's something that we need to dive into. So I think those are a lot of little things that a lot of people don't think about. And am I getting pitchers out in 3 pitches? As simple as it is, it's like a lot of people want strikeouts. I know myself on the mound, I love strikeouts. There's nothing more exciting, but am I keeping my guys engaged? The last recruiting trip was the only trip I've ever brought the radar gun. And so it's like a lot of people rely on that. And you have to in some way, shape, or form. But then I think about my journey, and it's if we relied on the radar gun, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunities that I would have had. So am I able to give those opportunities to kids that really want to work hard and are good, not only people, but are good people for our system? And I think it's things like that that a lot of people don't think about. It's win, 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 and I love winning. But are we doing it at the right cost, or are we doing it with the right people? And are we bringing the right people in-house to do those types of things? If you're a good person and you love the game, in some way, shape, or form, you will find an opportunity if you put your name out there. And I think a lot of youth kids need to understand you don't have to overpower a guy. There are a lot of JUCOs that are developmental JUCOs that are just looking for guys who want to eat dirt, want to do the little things that a lot of coaches preach, but no one understands. Okay, that's what we mean. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't understand that until their career's over with, oh, coach was right. He just maybe didn't understand how to explain that to me in the way that I needed him to. When we meet the athlete where they're at and we're able to see those things and have those conversations, that's the exciting thing.
You're looking obviously at the skill set, but you're looking for those players that know the game, that care about the game, that have a passion for the game. Interesting when you mentioned some of the pitching stuff you look for. I ask this to the listeners. We get hyped up on strikeouts, but let me ask you, if you saw a post on social media or you read an article or you see something on TV, a highlight reel of a pitcher, and they throw a complete game and it says complete game with 81 pitches or complete game 78 pitches, does that not fire you up more than seeing a pitcher that has 13 strikeouts? I actually get way more pumped up when I see so-and-so in the regional 2 weeks ago or in his conference championship game threw a complete game 82 pitch, or Greg Maddux. And I think of Burley also, with Mark Burley, the well-known former White Sox pitcher, and he threw that perfect game at home years ago. And I think about how fast Mark Burley pitched. He worked quick and he threw strikes. Like you're saying, Coach, hey, the guys behind you, center field, they're looking around, dandelions. That said, I know you talked about what you're looking for in younger players as a recruiter, as a coach. What's something that separates a recruit who succeeds in college from one who flames out based on what you've seen?
Do they have a routine, but at the same time, is that routine something that they put together and understand, or is that something that they were just given? Once that is understood, are the coaches around him able to articulate if there are things that he might need to look into and be able to have those conversations, or are there things that make no sense that the coach is not willing to look at? And I think at the simplest form is I was blessed with understanding pitching from a young age. Even in college, I had almost the same routine since I was 12. That could have been the idea that I was decently stubborn and didn't want to change anything, and that probably was a little bit. So I think the cool part about that is we can understand it from a player's perspective and put ourselves in those shoes and like, okay, if you were in this position, I know you wouldn't think this either. It's those types of things. And I think understanding their process, I think that's the big thing. Mentality, and I think mindset's the most important. And what I mean by that was I wouldn't tell my guys this now from a mental side of things. I was so articulate with my thought process that I would close my eyes, and during meditations, I would pretend I gave up the whole batting order, top to bottom, bomb, homer, homer, homer. And then so once I got in the game, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So my mentality couldn't be broke. I could have someone chirping something that tried to make me laugh on the mound. It wouldn't faze me, because in those preparation moments, we thought about absolutely everything that could happen. And when we think about absolutely all those types of, I guess, opportunities for failure, we know only maybe a couple of those are going to occur. So when they do happen, we're already 100% prepared because we've already went through that mentally. A lot of players are just, they might look at it from a preparation perspective, but it's a very lukewarm approach. So I think the big thing about that is, at least from seeing kind of a youth player versus a college player, it's just like they love the boring parts of the game. If you want to be successful, you have to really enjoy the boring parts of the game. Pitchers don't enjoy PFPs as much as everyone thinks they do. That's just part of the game. No one enjoys charting, but you learn so much from that. And you can have those different types of conversations based off of, okay, his misses are here today with this pitch. I know we had a very tight-knit group in college, and we were actually blessed between the three of us. We didn't only pitch together, we actually stayed at the college together afterwards. So the one that actually before we hopped on here, the one that's now in Milwaukee, he was part of our three-headed monster, we called it. So it was myself, him, and actually our assistant AD now. So two of our assistant coaches last year, and then our assistant AD, after we were all done, we still stayed in-house because of what that place meant to us and those different types of things. And when you look at it from that and you understand people are trying to give back, it's like it really shows the impact that maybe those different types of places had on a guy that you don't really think about. And when we're able to look back at the three of us, we're able to show how we led in those different types of things now in a different role. I think there's a lot of importance in that. I'm sure it wasn't easy for our head coach at the time, us three graduating. We graduated 600 innings at the same time in college, and that's tough on a program for sure. So a lot of our younger guys didn't get those opportunities in game, but we hoped that we were able to show that through things like that. So I think when those different types of things happen, are the people at the top of maybe your older guys, are they able to to show the younger guys the ropes, or are they just there to be there for their own good? And I think if you're able to teach it, you're able to do it. But if you have trouble teaching it, it's really hard to do it. And so, but if you're able to have those conversations and understand where that athlete's at, that's when you're going to have success. And that's when the team's going to have success, because everyone's following that same idea or following those same principles that are a little bit more outward than just individual opportunities.
For youth coaches working with 12 to 15-year-olds, this could even be high school coaches, what does effective age-appropriate pitching development look like in your view? What gives them a better chance of avoiding overuse or injuries while still pushing for growth?
I think the most influential thing, at least as of late, I'm a huge believer in water bags. I love water bags. But if I was to ask you, how are you going to hold your water bag? Everyone's going to hold it differently, right? But the idea behind that is based off of how you hold it, that's your movement pattern, and that's your brain telling yourself, okay, this is how I move. But if we were to tell every kid, hey, hold it this way, they're never going to reach their full potential because we're turning them into robots. I have kids who are going to carry it in the front. I have kids who are going to carry it over their shoulders. I have kids who hold it around their belly. I have one kid who puts it over one shoulder, under one arm, and throws it like this. But that's their movement pattern. So if we're able to see based off of how they hold these different types of kind of attachments or objects, and how loud that water is, they're getting that audio feedback where it's like, okay, this one's louder than this one. So instead of completely telling them to change their mechanics, it's okay, how does that feel for you? We have to ask questions. We don't have to give them answers. We have to ask questions to let them answer what they feel, because we are not able to feel that. I think a lot of coaches fall into those patterns of, okay, this looks right, so this is how everyone needs to do it. That's incorrect, because everyone moves differently. Everyone has a different story. I at least attack it a little bit differently. The big thing for me is I'll ask those crazy questions like favorite TV shows, favorite movies, things like that, and be able to relate that back to the athlete. So I had one kid who, strange story to say the least, but he's terrified of gum on the bottom of his shoe, and he wasn't able to rotate the back foot. And so if we think about that from this perspective, if his back foot's like this and he has gum on his shoe, if he lifts that back foot up, that gum's just going to stretch, right? And so when he rotates, it's just going to stretch, and he's going to see that. And he's not going to want to see that gum because he's terrified of that gum. But if he rotates out of it and rips it, then he can get out of that back foot. So it's things like that. It's things that don't have to make sense to us. They have to make sense to the athlete. And when we're able to do that and put those opportunities in their shoes instead of what we're able to see, that's when we're going to have success. I think the big thing, at least now, is pimp the finish, right? Understanding how to be very fluid through the finish. And there's a lot of kind of studies on that. That's very beneficial. But the thing about that is that looks different from everyone. So you can say something and it has all different meanings. Some guys can pimp it and stay down. Some guys can pimp it and have to get all the way back just because that's how their body moves, without getting too much into a tangent because it is more a youth podcast. But there's two different types of movers. There's very kind of fluid movers. We call those aerial movers. And there's very bogged down movers who are terrestrial movers. Your bigger kids who move slower that need more power, those are more your terrestrial guys. So the funny thing about that is even in warm-ups, you can tell who's an aerial and who's a terrestrial mover, because one gets a lot higher off the ground because they're a lot more springy on the lower half and they're springy on the top half. And then you have some guys who have to stay close to the ground and more terrestrial movers. Once they plant, a lot of people think that when we throw, it's a ground force. What happens is, if I was to tell you, and a lot of youth athletes get this incorrect, if you're standing, are your feet on or are they off? Are your legs turned on or are they off? And a lot of kids will get that wrong because they think that they're just standing. Well, you wouldn't be able to stand unless something's turned on. So being able to kind of have those conversations, and even if it is maybe a little bit more of a advanced idea like aerial terrestrial, when you're able to kind of show exactly what those mean, at least for my guys at Renegade, and I know for my guys at Crown, we have a packet that's 15 pages and it's going to tell you pre-throw, post-throw, things like that. And we're going to break it down into those different types of areas, but we're going to base it off of what you feel and what you feel is beneficial. I have everyone go through and they actually put a smiley face by things that make sense and they enjoy, and then we cross out the ones that they don't enjoy, because if they don't enjoy it, they're not going to put that into their routine. But if there's a benefit behind it, we need to explain the benefit more than just, okay, yeah, this might not look the most exciting or this might not look the most fun, but we know based off of research and how you've been able to attack these things, then this is when we're going to have success. And I myself, I've been able to see that. I've been blessed that I now have two 14-year-olds that are low eights under myself at Renegade. And so who I've seen from 73, 74, and I've had them for 2 years. Now they're 80, 81, getting some pretty good, at least Midwest recognition. And I got one kid who moves a little bit funky, but is a really hard worker. And if I changed how he moved, he'd be a robot and he wouldn't be as talented. Sometimes us as coaches, we have an ego where it's like, okay, this works for me, so this is how it has to work for everyone. But when we pigeonhole people in those types of ideas, then there's no individuality in the game anymore. And so they can't express themselves freely, and then they turn into robots. And if they turn into robots, then they're never going to reach their full potential because they have that voice in the back of their head saying, you must do it this way, instead of my body's telling me to do it this way. There's so many very talented 8 to 10-year-olds that have been told that you must do it this way that are no longer going to be successful because they have to fall into these patterns to have success, because that's what coaching used to be. Hey, it has to be this way. Hey, it has to be this way. And now we're understanding like the individuality in the game is what actually is propelling guys into those different types of opportunities. And when we're able to see it from that perspective, that's when we're going to find those results. So youth coaches and parents, if your kid's moving in some type of movement profile that you know he's having a lot of success with, and he goes to maybe a one-off coach that doesn't understand his movement profile and tries to change that, I might look a different direction, because you're really not meeting your son or daughter where they're at. You're falling into those patterns of, hey, this guy is just saying things. We have to understand that side of things as well.
That's a great point. And something I just pulled out of that to share with the listeners. If you take your kid to, let's say, like a private instructor, and they start tweaking things right off the bat, that can be a red flag. I'm not saying it is necessarily a red flag, but it can be a red flag. If they don't do a little homework or ask questions before even starting, whether it's a hitting coach or a pitching coach or catching or infield or whatever, if there aren't questions to get to know and connect with that player, and also if they start making physical adjustments right off the bat or early on in that first lesson, that's a big red flag. Now, in defense of these coaches, they feel like, hey, mom and dad are paying me $75 or $50 or $100 to get the kid better. And if I don't change something, then why did they even come? You need to be upfront. And the same for coaches, dads too. If you're coaching a team, moms, if you're coaching your kids, you have to be upfront with this. Say, hey, I need to have a little more depth, a little more background on the player before I start making these tweaks. And another thing too is a lot of coaches will try to change the player's movements, and the player can't actually do those movements. Part of it is because, like you said, the type of mover they are. And another part of it is they haven't trained any of those movements. Speaking of being better movers, and some of these guys, they got quick arms. Velocity seems like a huge focus these days. How do you balance the pursuit of velocity or velo with true pitching development that leads to better command and movement and health?
I think it goes back to those water bags and med balls. At least what it used to be is when we were going through those different types of patterning, you couldn't do it without throwing a baseball. But with how much you were throwing a baseball, at least probably in the 80s and 90s, when there weren't as many injuries and things like that, it was because we were working the arm so often with those movement patterns without the pursuit of velocity, because it was, hey, if I can get outs in the big leagues, I can get outs in the big leagues, and it doesn't matter how hard it is. But now it's, okay, if I don't hit a number, he's not even projectable. But that doesn't show anything on the mentality side of things. That doesn't show anything on if there's bases loaded and it's a 3-2 count, is he throwing it with a lot of intent, or is he just throwing it over the plate? I think from at least a velocity standpoint, it comes with just growing up naturally. It does. Eating right, putting the right calories in your body. I know a lot of youth kids don't like the fruits and vegetables. They are important. They really become important when we get older, and we really don't think about that. And so those little things like that, are we getting enough water? Are we getting enough sleep? And when we're able to do that and attack those things in that way, I'm not saying that you can't go off, and if you're, I guess, recalculating in your brain, is you going to play video games or things like that, I'm not saying don't do that, because that's your love and we don't want to take away your love. But be able to bring that some way back into the game. I know things for me, there's a lot of different sports that we're able to take things from, but there's also a lot of different games that we're able to take things from. I was able to, growing up, I did a lot of pool and ping pong tournaments. And so from a mentality perspective, that taught me a lot. I'm also a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. So from a discipline perspective, and when you kind of have a guy who was the drill instructor for the Korean War, and you're maybe not behaving in that way, like you understand real quick, because he's not going to say things that you understand, but you're going to understand because of how he talks about them. It's things like that, and being able to understand all those different parts that go into it. Some of our best athletes on the planet are baseball players because we can do all those different things because there are so many different ideas within it. Mostly are great basketball players. We are mostly all can throw a football decent. From a rotational perspective, we all can hit a golf ball far. But how do we bring all those ideas into pitching? How do we bring them into hitting? How do we understand, okay, everything's from a rotation standpoint, but how do I get my feet into the ground for a stability point to be able to rotate from my plane of movement? That's the importance. My plane of movement. Not little Johnny's plane of movement. My plane of movement. When we're able to see that with water bags and be able to see that with med balls, I think the big thing is if you're able to take a radar gun and velo the med ball, if we get a 2-pound med ball and you see how hard that is. And so now instead of feeling, okay, now I'm really trying to feel, okay, how much pressure am I putting on the arm through to get the velo, and being able to only check velo in maybe game settings or when they really start to kind of get into that circuit of, okay, now they need to get looked at, and we completely take the radar gun out of their hands before 15, 16, we're going to have a lot healthier elbows because no one's going to be trying to hit a number. No one's going to be trying to, okay, this is what I need to do because I see this 14-year-old on the other side of the world hitting this number. So if I'm not hitting this number, then I'm inadequate. That's not true. That kid is probably gifted, but he hasn't been in those situations of people trying to pigeonhole him to be something he isn't. There's a lot of things that a video can't tell us. There's a lot of things that a radar gun can't tell us. A radar gun can't tell me if he's going to get into a ball game and he's going to have that mentality to get that out. And no one thinks about it in that way anymore. I've been able to sit with a lot of college recruiters now, and it's like, if he doesn't hit this number, I'm not interested. And I see the kid and I'm like, okay, I know he has that mentality. Come on. But then it's like one of those things too, where it's like, if your program doesn't always have all the bells and whistles, no one wants to come because everyone wants the bells and whistles now. It's not about the product. It's about all the intangibles within that product. And I think at times, even at the youth level, people are jumping team to team because, oh, this guy's got a swag bag for $150. Not, okay, this is the type of things that we are able to give you, not only from a baseball perspective, but I think a lot of youth athletes don't understand that everything that might transpire when they're younger, they're going to encounter that in life. And coaches understand that, and we're trying to teach that. But how do we teach that to that athlete? And once we're able to teach that, okay, now they're going to trust us when we do give those types of small critiques and things like that, that we're going to be able to have that success with them and have that relationship with them. And it's not transactional anymore. It's transformational because we understand the athlete where they're at.
Becoming a player that's a gamer, becoming a player that gets out on the mound and competes and pitches with intent, taking that baseball IQ up a notch or two. It's okay if you want to throw a little harder and build your physical strength up, and that's good, or get faster or hit the ball a little harder, hit harder line drives, but work on those other things that probably are more controllable, just given genetics and things like that and predispositions. What's a trend in youth baseball, travel ball, or showcases that's got you the most concerned right now? And maybe what are like a positive shift that you're seeing or you're hoping for?
I think a lot of coaches at times, at least when it's not bracket play and it's really important games, aren't thinking about the kid 4 or 5 years down the road in high school when it matters. They're worried about that $10 trophy. And I think that's even being in that youth kind of atmosphere at times. As a coach, that's tough because in the back of your head, all you want to do is compete. But at the same time, am I doing the best for my coaching resume, or am I doing the best for my athlete's life resume? And I've played with kids who have been 6'1" when we were 10, and they believed that they were going to be the next Mike Trout, next Ken Griffey Jr. They didn't really even make it out of a small NAIA. It's the reality is the best, and I think the coolest part about this, and I'm sure you have quite a bit of understanding on this. Have you seen the Scooball Skeens All-Star Game interview?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so Paul Skeens had one offer at a high school, and that was Air Force. Scooball had one offer, and he was a walk-on. So our two guys who started the All-Star Game didn't only start the All-Star Game, both of them have Cy Youngs. Had one opportunity as seniors in high school. The hardest thrower in the MLB right now went to a Division III, and people aren't okay now with going to Division IIIs. But that's where you develop. If you look back specifically at, if you would have told me I was 74 as a senior in high school, and I would darn near end my career touching 90 at 5'9", I would have looked at you and laughed. The game gives what you give it. And I think a lot of people want things right away. And that's awesome, but are you putting in that work to be able to see those results? Or are you just a guy who's gifted? If we're talking about the true guys who are posting those incredible videos at a young age, they were gifted, and from a work ethic perspective, they aren't going to have to work as hard, but once they understand that they do have to work that hard, then things are going to start to catch up with them. You'll see them get to the minors, you won't see them get out of the minors. The guys that get out of the minors weren't anything as younger kids, but they have a process, they have an understanding. And when we look at it from those different types of things, that's when we're going to have success, because we've been able to not only have that process, but at the same time be able to get through those different types of opportunities as well.
Each player, each kid, they got their own path. You mentioned those 2 Cy Young Awards, and then you alluding to the D3 player Mason. He actually is also a type 1 diabetic too, so another challenge on top of that. Now he's lining himself up for a bright future for many years and big paydays and things like that. I think back to 20 years ago, it would have been 20 years ago, I was coaching in the semifinal game for the Southern California High School Championship. And this is off your point of the chasing these coaches, chasing a trophy or chasing something and not looking out for the kids' long-term future. And our ace that year, his name was Jonathan Pettibone. Jonathan made it to the major leagues at 22, pitched for the Phillies. And Jonathan was our ace, but he was a junior, and he had pitched the complete game the week before, the Friday before, and this was Tuesday. The semifinal was Tuesday, and we were playing Long Beach Wilson. And I actually coached at Long Beach Wilson back in 2003. I was there. This was in Southern California. It didn't allow high school coaches to coach in the fall. It was illegal. It was against the rules, I should say, to coach. So they brought me in during the offseason from pro ball, and I coached a lot of these kids. So anyways, we're in the semifinals at UC Riverside. Long Beach Wilson was number 1 in the country high school, number 1 of all high schools in the entire country. And we're up 4-3, and it's the 7th inning, last inning, and we're going into that last inning. And the head coach that I worked with was telling me to put in Jonathan. He wanted him to go down and warm up in the bullpen. He said, go get him warmed up. I sent him down, and I went to Jonathan down there, and I said, Jonathan, you're not going in this game. I don't care what coach says. I go, if you go in this game, I'm never going to coach at this school again. And I told that to the coach, the head coach, who was a Hall of Fame coach, speaks at ABCA conventions. And I said, if Jonathan pitches in this game, I will not be at the next game. I go, if I am, it's only for the kids, but I will not coach with you again. He got very upset at me that you could tell he was steaming, and he kept his cool in the dugout. But I went down to the bullpen. I said, Jonathan, you're not pitching in this game. There's just no way. I did the math. I knew how his arm felt. I asked him how he felt. I asked him what was going through his arm and his body, and he was definitely not ready to pitch again. He made it very clear to me. And so I put my job on the line and whatnot and just said, hey, I'm not pitching him. And he did not pitch. And guess what? We went with our number 3 guy, and they got the best of us, and they won the game in the 7th inning on a walk-off. And Long Beach Wilson went on to win the national title, the Baseball America and a USA Today national title. I put that out there, and I think that's something that, hey, you just have to go, what do you stand for? And stand for it. And be malleable in some of the other areas and be open-minded in the other areas. I know we are running tight on time. How you doing, Coach? How are we doing on time? Do you have time for another question? Or
Yeah, I'll be good. Yeah.
All right, Coach. The next question, you've spoken about faith, leadership, and purpose in coaching. How do these elements help build mental toughness in young players, especially when they're dealing with failure and pressure and all that adversity on the field?
Yeah, I think at the simplest form, it's God is good, right? I think if you look at my story and my journey, you can tell probably a lot of these opportunities I wouldn't have without my faith. And being able to understand God's sacrifice of his only son, Jesus on the cross for us, and understanding what he had to endure, anything that we endure now, it's not at the forefront. It's really not that much. And how I look at it with my story is truly every day is a gift. So how am I going to live it? And am I going to give back, or am I going to be selfish? I could have had the opportunities to go play overseas, but is that a selfless idea or is that a selfish idea? I looked at it as a selfish idea because there's a lot of people who can play the game. There's not a lot of people who can coach the game. So if you're someone who can coach the game and you're in that kind of opportunity, if you want to not only give back or go play, if you have the intangibles to go play, but at the same time understand, are you hurting kind of development of other people with that decision as well? So
I love it. Just being grateful for each day, thankful and grateful, and staying grounded. And speaking of staying grounded, a lot of youth teams struggle with player buy-in and culture. So what practical strategies have you used or seen to develop leaders and strong team cultures at the high school level, the college level, and maybe something that could even, be passed down to the youth game?
Yeah, I think crazy little things that somehow relate. So for the high school level, we had, I think it was a 25 question Google sheet that I'd send out, and it'd be like, what's your favorite Gatorade flavor? So a lot of kids would say blue, a lot of kids would say red, and then you have those odds and ends guys who are like, I guess Glacier Freeze is very common, but then I'm a cucumber lime guy. So based off of their answers, you could tell if they're more of an outside the box thinker or if they're more straightforward, and you can have those different types of conversations with them. When I go for mound visits at the college level, I take different college visits all the time. There's one kid who thinks so often that I hit him with 90 movie reviews because he's got so many things going on in his head. I just confuse him. There's other ones who need to laugh. There's other ones that you need to get on because they don't want to be coached hard. But you have to understand that athlete. And when you understand all these different types of people who are going to be in your clubhouse, all these different types of people who are going to be in your organization, then you can come up with your core values through that, because now you know exactly how to attack that. Like, sometimes you have to be funny to attack those guys who are going to be funny. But that's in a lot of those one-on-one conversations. That's not always those conversations as a team. So what is your team culture? What is your team looking at it? So you can see that in a practice setting. But from an individuality perspective, it's like when I'm having those one-on-one conversations, that's when we can really start to go into those things. And when we attack it that way, everyone's going to have success on the field because they know that you believe in them as them. And when you believe in them as them, then it becomes an us issue. When it becomes an us issue, then everyone's on the same goal. When everyone's on the same goal, we are going to not only continue to get to that goal, we're going to have those ideas in place to be able to flourish within that goal.
Get the right players on the bus. And, this is the 80-20 baseball podcast. So I'm really a big fan of the 80-20 principle in every area of life. But what are some vital things that youth or high school coaches should focus on to have the biggest impact on their players' long-term success and love of the game? I know we've talked about some things here, but is there something that we haven't hit on that's a vital thing that that coaches could focus on to have the biggest impact on their players' long-term success and love of the game?
What is their interaction with their parents like? Is it a good interaction, or is it something that they're hesitant to, and is baseball an outlet for them to get away from that? If it is an outlet to get away from that, don't be that coach that makes them feel like it's the same way that it is at home. It needs to be an inviting atmosphere. It needs to be something that they want to go do. It needs to be something that when they get to practice, it's like, yes, I get to practice, not no practice. I'm not saying you have to have full-on conversations with families, because that's not always something that you need to do. A lot of coaches are completely hands-off and have had a lot of success with that. I myself, at the college level, there's some families that I know I can go have conversations with. There's other ones who don't always enjoy what we have to say because maybe their son is not having the type of opportunities that they think, but they don't understand what we see, and they don't understand being around them in that setting, how they go about things at practice, things like that. But when we're able to have different parents at those practices and be able to see those different types of things, now you can see, okay, little Johnny's not performing this way, but is he not performing this way because you're there and he doesn't want to mess up and you're one of those guys who only hits on the negative? And so I think the really cool rule, at least at the youth level, at least for travel ball, we do have a lot of fathers who are travel ball coaches, right? And I don't remember 100% who said it. The hats off rule in the car, I think, is wonderful. Hat on, I can talk to my son or daughter as a coach. Hat off, that I'm just dad. And when we're able to differentiate the game between that and from a family perspective, then you're going to have that different types of respect. But if they want to go on a tangent on the game, let them, because that's when they want to learn. But if there's going to be times where they're not going to have a good game and they're just not going to want to talk. And you just have to be there as a father. You just have to be there as a mother. You just have to be there as a caregiver. But if you're not able to understand that, then that's when you're gonna hit a wall, and the kid's gonna eventually not love the game because you're forcing it down their throat.
Sometimes we need to be facilitators rather than leaders and pushing them. You got me thinking when players show up to practice, and some of them, and in certain cases, many of them are coming from home situations that aren't that rosy. And just a couple tangible things, coaches, we can do when kids show up. Tell your players, tell them each individually, not as a group. You could do it as a group, but tell them each individually when they show up, say, hey, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're here. That message, a lot of times there are parents that make their kids just not feel like they want to see them. And so as a coach, if we can say, hey, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're here today. And then the other thing is just a big, genuine smile when you see your players when they show up. That kind of goes back to what you were first talking about there, but just some tangible things. And speaking of a piece of advice for youth baseball coaches, as we finish up here, what's one final piece of advice that you would like to share with the youth baseball coaches listening right now about the most important role beyond the X's and O's in wins and losses? What would that be?
I had a professor in college, and I don't think I've ever heard anything spoken so eloquently but so simple at the same time. Life is relationships, the rest is just details. Nothing else truly matters if the relationships that you have around these sports and things that we're going to do in our lives, if there's nothing behind that. If it's just a transactional interaction, then nothing's going to come of it. At the college level, the big thing for us is we want guys for 4 years and we want to impact them for 40. We want to go to your weddings. We want to be able to be part of your kids' lives. We want you guys to come back and be able to see what's happened. Hop on a phone in 10 years and act like nothing's changed. Same thing at the youth level. Make those kind of relationships with their families, and when they go off and play college ball or high school ball, even if you're not in the area, be able to have those conversations, be like, hey, how's he doing from a mental perspective, not always just a physical perspective. And when we're able to attack the athlete from that mentality perspective and really show that you're not just a radar gun number, you're not just a batting average, you're not just a fielding percentage, and we really look at them as, hey, you're a person and we need to treat you as one, that's when we're always going to have not only that buy-in from that athlete, we're going to have that buy-in from that organization that we're working for, because it is bigger than baseball. But we have to show it's bigger than baseball, and if we're not able to show that, jobs are going to be few and far between because we're not relational. There's a lot of really good coaches, but if you're not relational, you're just there. So I think if we're able to have those relationships, we can make it really far in this business. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of youth coaches. It's like a lot of us do have 9-to-5 jobs on the side, right? So what type of interactions are we doing? Are we just doing it to be around the game, or are we doing it to make an impact? And I've seen both. And if you're just doing it to be around the game because you miss it, respectfully, please leave, because you're hurting everyone that's involved and you're not allowing people to be the best versions of themselves.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Coach. This was awesome. I do appreciate you coming on, Ryan. I think we could probably talk for hours. Maybe down the road, if you have time, I'd love to have you come back on. This was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Been a true blessing.
Well, I appreciate it. And we'll wrap up there and hope you have a great summer.
Yes, sir. Same to you. God bless.
All right, that wraps up the interview with Coach Ryan Vondracek. I was really impressed with how he came prepared to share out with all of you great listeners. A lot to take away from that, a lot to learn, and a lot to elevate our coaching game and players to elevate your game. Next week, I'm going to share 2 specific things coaches should do, and these 2 things alone will likely reduce the amount of questions you receive from parents and players by 80%. 2 specific tips, 2 specific strategies to reduce the majority of questions you're going to receive from parents and players, reducing confusion, increasing clarity about expectations and things to expect, so we can be on the same page and have more success and better seasons. And next week, we have an interview with quite possibly the most famous youth baseball umpire in America. We got the full interview coming next week. He's a hoot, he's a character, and I love his take on umpiring. First umpire we've had on this podcast. So that is coming next week. And until then, let's keep taking care of our health so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, and we can be at our best when we go out there on the field the next time. Y'all rock. Take all this info out there, put it into play. Take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.